Hi, my name is Bethany Stahl. I'm a full-time author and illustrator, and today I am going to be starting my InDesign series, which is going to teach you how to format a children's book from start to finish. Now, before we start, this is going to be a multi-part series, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you can see every single video of this series that releases. It will also be added into a playlist that will be available on my main channel page. So don't forget to skip around or watch the whole thing if you want to learn how to format a children's book from start to finish. I will also say that before we start, if you have additional in-depth questions, or if you would like to just go ahead and download the template and skip ahead in this series to the fun formatting stage, go over to patreon.com/Bethany Stahl, where you can download my template and use that. Now that template is going to be populated with links on tutorials on how to do your LCCN, your copyright, with my copyright page sample, what to put on every single page, and all of that fun goodness. Now that is going to be only available to Patreons in the Self-Pub Squad or Workshop Squad, so make sure you go over there and join the squad and get that tutorial. If you want to go through this process of learning how to format a book and all the headaches that come with this, let's continue. So, if you are new to my channel, I am all about being real with you and making this publishing process as realistic as possible. This is my job. I'm fortunate enough that self-publishing has worked out for me, and I have this huge goal that I just want to share what it's really like. So you'll see all of these videos that are like, oh yes, this is so simple. All you have to do is press publish and you make $1 million. Like, come on, let's get real. We're going to talk about the real stuff here. So if you're interested in other tips and tricks about publishing and me sharing my numbers from different promotions and things of that sort, what I found useful, what I find not useful, again, Patreon's going to have a lot of that. But on YouTube, I share a ton of information. So dive through all of my videos and you'll learn a whole lot. So let's start. All right, so first things first, we're going to be using KDP as our example. There are a few different print-on-demand options that you can use. I do recommend KDP. It's my personal favorite as of this moment, so that may change in time. I do have a KDP versus Ingram Spark video. Of course, you can use them together, which is what I do ultimately recommend, but my preference is still with KDP. So what we're going to be doing is using KDP as the example. Ingram Spark is going to take the same interior files. So luckily, if you format it for one, it should work for the other. Just always get a proof and double check just in case something goes wonky. You never want to put it out there to the public and have a mistake in there. So proofs first, always. Okay, so before we jump into InDesign, I do want to say InDesign is a paid program. So Adobe right now does do a monthly subscription, which is a little annoying because you cannot buy the program outright. There are other alternatives that you are more than welcome to use that do let you buy outright, but all of my tutorials are going to be for InDesign. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I do have templates. I do make templates available in other formats. So if you have Affinity Publisher, my templates will also work for that because I export them so you can use them in that program as well. So I've got you covered, but I am going to be using InDesign. Why I use InDesign is because I use all of Adobe's programs to publish. So I use Adobe Photoshop to illustrate. I use Adobe InDesign to format. I use Adobe Audition to record for my videos and my animated audiobooks. I use Adobe After Effects for the audiobooks animated version. I use their media encoder to take it from After Effects to YouTube. I use Adobe Premiere to edit, and I use Adobe Illustrator to make my logos for my series like you see right here. So the Save the Earth logo. So I use a handful of their programs. So for me, paying for their subscription is cost effective with how much I am working. They do have a la carte options, so definitely go over and check out. Pick something that's the best price. I'm definitely not for wasting money. We all need to be really savvy, especially with self-publishing. Our income is very important to what we want to spend money on and what we'd rather not. So choose the cheapest option for you and get that. So unfortunately, paying for programming is a part of publishing expenses. So make sure you just wrap that in when you're looking at your profits. So enough talk about the business side. there's plenty of videos and resources out there on that I have put out there. So if you're interested in that, go deep dive. And until then, let's, for real this time, jump into InDesign. Okay, so this is InDesign, and as you can see, I have been working on all of my books lately, so I just went through a major update. One of the things I will say that is a pro about formatting yourself and using a print-on-demand company versus printing in bulk is that I make changes to my books all the time. So in the back of my books, I have a nice little page that tells you all of my other books. Well, as I publish new books, I love to update that page so readers know. I cannot tell you how many times readers have told me, oh my gosh, there's more than 3 books in your series? Oh, there's more than 4? There's more than 5? Yes, there are. So staying up to date for me is something that is so important and up top on my list for my readers. So this is a KDP hardcover. I have a video about this if you want to see that. And this is a KDP paperback. So you'll see me using both as examples. And they're both available on Amazon. So if you're not familiar with me, I'm most known for my Save the Earth series, which is a children's book series about environmentalism and loving Earth and animals. And it's all happy, warm, and fuzzy. Okay, so in InDesign, what we are going to do is right here, click on New File. So this will bring up this scary little screen. And in the screen, we will look over here. So these are our preset details. So we can name this document. I never do until the very end, but you can. And then here we have our width and height. Now you may notice this looks really weird. What the heck is a pica? So if you aren't in the design world, that might be some scary, weird measurement you've never heard of. I had never heard of it when I started my career. So I was very strange of what the heck is that. But luckily, this is a drop-down menu, and you can choose inches or millimeters or centimeters. Wherever you are at in the world, there should be a measurement here for you to use. So since we're in the US and we do everything backwards, we're going to choose inches. So now you can see I have my width and my height. Now for my children's books that are my 32-page paperbacks, I do make them 32 pages. So, and I do like them in this square size. So the square size I use is an 8.5 by 8.5. Now, I know a lot of you who watch my videos have opted to use the square size and taken my lead with that. You are more than welcome to do a square size. It is very popular in the children's book world, but you don't have to. So for example, this one is in 8.5 by 11. So if you prefer a different sized book, that's okay. If you're not sure what size you prefer, you can always go to a bookstore or a library and grab some books. But in my experience, I really love the squares. Children seem to really love the squares, and they're so fun. Squares are cool. So what we are going to do is make this 8.5 by 8.5. Now, that would be all fine and dandy if there wasn't a such thing as a bleed. So if you have never heard of a bleed is when you want your color to go to the very end of the page. So see how there's no white space there? This means this page is a bleed. And if you use KDP, they will ask you, do you have a bleed or no bleed? So this is what this means. Since we do have a bleed in this book, and a lot of children's books will have a bleed at least on one page, what KDP recommends is to add on a little bit of space extra so when they cut your book on the machine, they are cutting within the color. If you don't do that, you run the risk of having a white edge around your book, which doesn't look too pretty and it doesn't look super professional. So the bleed will prevent that from happening. And sometimes their printers do get off. They cut a little crooked, or maybe they'll cut a little extra, or just things can happen. And this is a norm for the entire publishing world. This is not just a print-on-demand company issue. So there are definitely little variances that happen. So you do want to have that extra space just so a customer doesn't get a book that has all this weird white space on it. I will say that I have not added a bleed space, so I have not added extra space on the end of every single book I've published. I have luckily not had a problem with KDP, so even uploading books without a bleed in the formatting and choosing a bleed when I am uploading, I have not had an issue yet. This is not to say that that won't ever become an issue. So I do recommend you try to put the bleed on your document. If you're like, again, if you can't figure it out, download my template and you'll be good to go. So just try to put that bleed on there. But if you are getting so frustrated and you can't do it and it's confusing and you're just not sure, you can do it without. Just always, always, always get a proof. No matter what, get a proof to make sure it's okay. And you do run the risk of a customer potentially getting a white edge. So just take that with a grain of salt. Do with it what you will. And let's continue on. So we're going to go over and check out KDP's page. Over here on this page, I will link it below down in the description. This is going to be a very, very, very confusing thing to look at. So it tells you, oh, if your page size is this is what you need for bleeds and margins and interiors and this and that and this and that. It's confusing. I'm not going to lie. Even me, who has published, I think, over 15 books by now, I look at this page and I start to get confused. It's a tough thing to comprehend and understand and visually put in all of these little margins. And if you aren't the best with numbers, adding up all these little decimal points can get very confusing. So let's do this together and tackle this together right now. So as you can see, they are illustrating what a bleed is. A bleed is your image goes to the edge here. So that's what I was just talking about. Now here they have examples of page size with and without bleed. So if we scroll down to my recommended children's book size, so 8.5 by 8.5, you will see they recommend a page size with bleed of 8.625 inches by 8.75 inches. Cool. But that doesn't tell us which to put on the outside, on which edge. That's just a page size, right? That's kind of confusing. So let's keep reading and see if we can figure this out. Now, it gets even worse when you continue because it starts to tell you, now you do your trim height. There's all these formulas. We thought that was over with in algebra. So what are they doing here? So we need to figure out which size our book is. So here they have an example of a 6 by 9 inch book. So what you can see is this 6 inches goes along the bottom to right here, and then they have that little nugget of a bleed. So their bleed here is 0.125. Now if we travel up here, we will see that they added the trim size here and then 0.25 here for a bleed. So 0.25 is 0.125 times 2. So what they did is add that 0.125 up here and add that 0.125 down here. Okay, so let's get a Photoshop document up here and let's draw this out for our book. And feel free to draw this out for your own book. I'm a visual person, so for me, when I see something and I map it all out, it definitely helps me figure out things a little bit better than, just conceptualizing all these little specific measurements in my head. Okay, so here we have our square book. Beautiful, right? Okay. So we know from the inside to the outside of the book, this is going to be 8.5 inches. And the same thing is going to be true for this side. So that's going to also be 8.5 inches. So we're only going to go ahead and focus on this side since each side will be the same. Now, since this is a square, we know from here to here is going to be also 8.5 inches. Now, since we are doing a bleed, we need that 0.125 added on. So here, this will be 8.625 for the bleed. And then here, we're going to have the bleed here, but we are also going to have the bleed here. So we need to add 0.125 twice because we need it on the top and the bottom. So don't forget that. Now let's scroll back up to where they said how big our page should be with the bleed. They got the same calculations, which means we're doing good. So they got 8.625 by 8.75 inches, which is what we just calculated. So we know this is right. Now your bleed is always going to be 1/8 of an inch extra. So you will always add 0.125 on whatever bleed you need. Now, the bleed does not change with the page count. What will change with the page count is margins. So let's take a look at that. So, more calculations. Now let's read. A typical children's book is going to be between 24 and 150 pages. Typically, you're going to have about a 32-page children's book. I will say you want to keep your children's book in a count of 4. That way you avoid extra pages at the end. If you want to know what I'm talking about, go over and join Patreon where we have a discussion over there about that. Other than that, let's keep reading. We want the inside gutter margins to be 0.375 inches. So the inside or gutter margins, KDP refers to them as the same thing, is going to be this space in here. Now this is important because we don't want any characters to cross over in the center, especially if you're doing a spread like I am. So you can have individual page illustrations, or you can have a spread, which is where you have one illustration that goes across 2 pages, which is what I do for my Save the Earth series. So with this, we want to make sure that we are giving space so nothing in here gets cut off from our text to our characters. This is also important because they will take some of your image and tuck it in so you cannot see any white space. So if you pull your book apart, you might be able to see just a little bit of white that's down in there. You will not see that normally. As you can see, I was having a hard time even getting any white space on my paperbacks. So they do glue it in pretty well, but you don't want any of that to show. And that's why they want you to have the gutter margins, because they want to take your book and squish it all together and glue it there. That way your customers see a flawless little edge here. So they want your inside gutter margins to be 0.375. and your outside margins to be at least 0.375 with your bleed. So what this is going to mean is inside here, we are going to have our safe zone. In our safe zone, we are allowed to have our characters, so faces, any key elements, and our text. If we go outside the safe zone, we risk it being too close to the edge or being sucked into the margins or being cut off with the bleed. You guys got me so far? So this is our happy, safe zone. So the inside gutter, we need 0.375. So here we want 0.375 inches. Okay, and let's see what else. Outside margins, 0.375. Okay, oh, they're the same. I can work with that. So we want this space to be all around here. So each of these is going to be 0.375. So now that we have a visual representation of what we know our book needs to look like, now that's time to jump back over into InDesign and plug all this in and hope that we got it right. All right, so let's go back over here. So we did the width and the height. We know it's going to be 8.5 by 8.5. That's good. The number of pages, like I said, children's books are typically 32. The weird thing about InDesign is we're actually going to say it's 31 pages. So why we say 31 pages is because our first page starts here right inside the cover. So this is going to be page 1, page 2, page 3, okay? So page 4, page 5, and this is going to continue on until the very end when we have page 31 here, and then this is actually going to be page 32, so the back of page 31. We will not format this because this page is dedicated to KDP. So they will put a little print on the back of your last page that says made in the USA, this area it was printed in, and the date it was printed on, along with a barcode, which is important. If customers have a problem, they'll ask for this barcode number. So this is their space. So always format your books for odd number of pages with KDP to give them that last page to go ahead and put their information on. So your last page is always going to be an odd page at the end. So that is why no matter what, if your page is 32, you're going to say 31. If your pages are 36, it's actually going to be 35 within InDesign. So it still counts as a 32-page book, but within InDesign, you always want that odd page. So we do want to check facing pages because what that means is we want the pages to be together like they are in a book. If we don't choose that, it will show us page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, all in a little line. But that's not what we want. We want them together like a book. So we'll have page 1, page 2, 3, page 4, 5. So just like if I ripped this book apart, which I'm really close to doing because I've been beating it up for this tutorial. So this would be page 1 on InDesign. So that would be page 1 up here. And then right under that, we would see page 2, 3, 4, 5. So it will go down like that. If you're doing a book, you always want to choose facing pages, so make sure that is checked every single time you create a book. Now let's go down here to our margins. We figured this out. Let's see if this is right. So let's go over to our Photoshop and we want 0.375 inches for our margin. So let's change this 3, 7, and it has a 5. And that changes all of that. So this link is if you want them to all be the same. Now, if you did not have the same margins on every side, you can always unlink this and then I can change that one to be something different. So that will definitely vary, especially if you aren't working with bleeds. But since we are and we're working with a square, I want to make sure that link is on. Now let's go here to bleed and slug. Okay, for the bleed and slug, this is where we are going to need to pay attention. The slug is something that we can ignore for now. That is something that we just don't need to learn at this point. So for the bleed, we've got to go back to that document and figure out what we need to put in where. So we need on the outside 1.25, okay? So on the outside here, we are going to unlink this because these will be different. We want 0.125. Great. And the inside doesn't get a bleed because the inside will be sucked in and we just have to be careful to not get too close. So the inside, we don't have to worry about, not a problem. All right, so the top and bottom, let's just go ahead and check back. Remember, it was 8.75 tall, but that means we need to add 0.125 to the top and 0.125 to the bottom. So coming back over here, the top, we want this to be 0.125 and the bottom to be 0.125. All right, you guys following so far? So now we can go ahead and click this blue button and create. Wow, look at this. We got our book.